I like it when Dad gets me fish and chips.
I love my dad because he's really nice and does everything that I want him to and that I asked him to do.
I love my daddy because he does everything for us. I love my dad because he gets all the money for the family and he keeps this family together really well.
And so I want to take a moment to talk about the most important job many of us will ever have, and that's being a dad.
I don't doubt that many of the rioters out last week had no dad at home, looking to the streets for their father figures.
I can think of very few relationships that are as precious as the relationship between a father and his daughter.
The world we live in it seem to operate on cinema. Society's existence bears an ugliness to witness. Listen closely, pay attention. See, there's people out there listening. Shadows lurking cause their policies to wipe out all resistance. Reality is that money is religion for so many. And the greed that people follow bring no happiness, if any. This planet floats alone in soccer. We are all just prisoners to the universe in time. Broken promises recycled from the government that claim to be the voices of the people. While their secret agencies are undercover, need to see through corporate industries are raping the earth, making it worse. Casualties are left to ponder, followed closely by the curve.
If there's one thing I've learned along the way, it's that all our personal successes shine a little less brightly if we fail at family. That's what matters most.
When a child's born, the bond and the sort of the kinship that you feel, it's second to no other feeling. The rest of my life, I mean, I get to have this little boy and I feel I've got my little girl as well, I have such a responsibility to my children, and which is a really good feeling. So makes you a bit nervous, but it's a great feeling as well. So
I think a lot of men are really happily married and happy being married, and marriage is good for men. And that's why it's such a shock for them when the rug is pulled out from under them. Because I think a lot of men think they're doing a good job at being a husband and a father.
I knew that the relationship was no longer working, but it was very sudden, and it wasn't sort of discussed in an amicable sense where, you know, look, it's not working, can we, you know, we need to separate, and it was very sort of, it was very hurtful.
From a situation, you know, 50 years ago where men had all the power, women had no choice but to stay in violent marriages, to stay in abusive marriage. You know, they had nowhere to go, they couldn't afford to support themselves, they couldn't look after their kids. And once women became financially independent and able to support themselves, that whole equation shifts, because women can leave if they're not happy. And women are leaving in droves.
I'd come in the front door and she'd be angry and, you know, often talking about financial problems, that there wasn't enough money in the house, and, you know, that I didn't earn enough money compared to her friends, husbands, etc. So that was a contentious issue for her.
It is perfectly all right in the eyes of society, whatever society is, you know, society, for a woman to say, I've been the subject of violence. For a man to say, I've been the subject of violence, what do you want about? Yeah. Man up. Suck it up, princess. All those things. Men don't say it, but I am satisfied it's there.
So I was just out in the car and she rang and said, you're not welcome here anymore. I'm going to change the locks. If you come near the place, I'm going to call the police. She threw my clothes, a small bag, over the fence, and I picked up my bag and I went to a friend's house and I stayed there for a couple of months in his spare room and on the couch. During that period, she said, you're never going to see your children again. Which, yeah, I mean, I don't even know how to describe to you when someone says, oh, you're never going to see your kids again.
What's happening now is that people are forming relationships much later, or at least lasting, stable relationships, marriages, much later, and then they're having children much later. And so what happens is that when that relationship has gone sour, the child is the only love object left who one can safely love.
I mean, the other day I saw my children walking home from daycare because they live only a couple of kilometres away. And I was riding my bicycle and I saw my children, and my little boy saw me and he shouted out, "Dada." And he started running after me, and you got to keep riding. You can't stop. Because all it takes is for them the mother to report that the father made a non-consensual approach or something of that nature, and you're gone. He didn't understand. He's 4. I don't think he understood why his father didn't stop for him. He has no idea. And he's craving time with me. He just wants to spend as much time as he can with me. And I think he has a lot of sadness and a lot of hurt about the fact that he can't see his dad when he wants to. He's frustrated, and I can sense that he's very angry.
Kids actually sit there in their own little quiet world, blaming themselves for their parents' eventual split up and divorce, you know? And it's those children need support. So when they mature and they start having relationships, they can have healthy relationships.
My youngest son's only 6. He completely oblivious to everything, but he still wants to know why he can't come down and see me or why he can't sleep over at my house anymore. And the painful part, you sort of want to say, it's not me, I want you to stay, it's your mum. But as soon as you say something like that, it's actually domestic violence and you could be banned from seeing your kids. So you've got to say things like, oh, I want to see you too, I'll see you soon. And you keep saying it, and after 2 years, you're still saying, I'm going to see you soon.
Younger children, I think, are more likely to tell you one way or the other what really they think should happen. Whereas older children are aware that they've got 2 parents, and they're very often very reticent about giving you anything other than, oh, I love them both, and given 3 wishes, my first wish is mum and dad would be back together. Second wish is usually I'd like a pony. But they really do have this aspect that they want both parents in their lives.
My ex actually said that I threw my daughter against the wall and knocked her unconscious, that she had to go down to the emergency ward. Now, the police and docs investigated that and found it to be completely false. There was no record of her even being down there.
I think domestic violence has always been there. I think the reporting of it is now only becoming the done thing. The trouble is that it has become almost, and this is where we started, I know, it's become almost too easy to make the allegation.
The second time I went in, I actually had over 40 pages of freedom of information records from police and docs where allegations had just been made, and some of them were 3 or 4 within a week. And I said to the judge, this is evidence of this. This is ongoing. The police are here saying these are unsubstantiated or they're just straight out false.
We need a situation where when people come into the family courts of Australia, if they tell lies that can be proven against them, the book is thrown at them. Unless and until that happens, we will have people thinking they can lie in the witness box freely. And that is a significant problem.
My kids were running away from home just to come and see me. She was calling the police and saying that I was beating them, and the police would come around and they'd be quite annoyed that they'd been called out. But it got to that point. I went into court with these police reports saying, look, my kids are running away from home. I've got these records of my daughter texting me from a payphone saying, Dad, come and pick me up. And I thought they would put an end to it.
One of the things that occurs in these situations is that the law enforcement people just get sick and tired of it. You know, I'm terribly sorry, here we are again. Translates fairly quickly into, madam, unless you can show me something, I'm not going to do this.
They did not want it shown that these women had dragged a case on for 2.5 years using lies. And even though I had proven it right at the start, they just didn't want to go on public record that this happens in the family court. And this judge sidestepped it very well and just put the focus on the fact that the women just couldn't follow the orders, so there's no point making it.
Another problem over many years is that orders are not properly enforced, and that's been a big complaint of some parents. I think we need to recognise, and I think the courts have recognised, the need sometimes to be very, very tough in enforcement, because if courts are going to make orders, those orders must be followed.
What did save me and got me back with my kids eventually is that I had affidavits. She was actually, when she was going out on weekends, she was dropping the kids off with me. So we said to the magistrate then, well, if I'm molesting them and I'm such a threat, why is she leaving them with me? And must have been lucky that day, so he asked her and she had no answer. But if I didn't have those affidavits and photos and things like that, I wouldn't have seen my kids again. And they would have been brought up for sure, being told that I'd abused them.
One of the things that used to worry me, and I know others, was proceedings would start with a mother making allegations of violence, sometimes even of sexual abuse. And then after a period of time, the matter would be settled, with the father having alternate weekend time from Friday night to Sunday morning, to Sunday night or Monday morning, with no supervision. And you'd hold the orders against the original application and say, how can this be? If you genuinely hold this belief, how can you permit, at least without testing it, by doing it by consent orders, how can you permit him to have this overnight unsupervised time? And they're the sort of things that really worry you.
And I mean, I have fought for the last 10, 11, 12 years just to make sure that I can be a part of their life. And it's cost me a lot of money, it's cost me jobs, it's disrupted our life completely, but I'll always fight. I know the allegation's going to keep coming. There's no way they're going to stop. They're going to keep coming until these kids are older.
When the previous government changed the law in 2006, they did bring in a penalty that if you made a false allegation, it could cost you in paying the other side's costs, or you could get a more severe penalty. But what did the Labor Party do when they came in? One of the first jobs was to remove the penalties for perjury or for lying to the court, making false allegations. So there's no opportunity to stop people or telling them that their behaviour is unacceptable.
Many reckless pieces of legislation were brought before this place under the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd-Labor-Greens alliance, but perhaps none were more reckless, more damaging to Australian families than their Family Law Family Violence Amendment Bill 2011. That law redefined family violence to mean just about anything and encouraged vindictive parents to make fraudulent claims to remove other parents from families. The Labor minister at the time claimed that no one would make such false claims, and yet, in a submission to the Senate Committee on Legal and Constitutional Affairs, an inquiry they had relating to the 2011 bill, Professor Patrick Parkinson from the University of Sydney referenced a report called Domestic Violence, Views of Queensland Magistrates, when he said, and I quote, "A survey of 38 Queensland magistrates found that 74% agreed with the proposition that protection orders are used in family court proceedings as a tactic to aid a parent's cause and deprive their partner of contact with their children."
It'd have to be some of the worst legislation that's ever been introduced anywhere in the world, in that it's suddenly been made subjective. So you can't say what would a reasonable person think in this situation. And would a reasonable person say, yes, this is domestic violence? That's not relevant anymore. All the person has to say, and it's virtually always the woman, is that I felt I was being threatened. And you can't possibly argue against that. How can, if someone says I felt I was threatened, you can't say, oh no you weren't, because you say I was. That's it. That's the end of the story.
The rule is that if there's now an allegation of any sort that's going to be detrimental to the child without any proof, that is going to be taken into consideration first before any sort of notion of shared parenting. Now that is atrocious. It's basically, guilty until proven innocent. In our courts of law, because of these changes that the Labor Party made to that Family Law Act.
This should be tested properly in criminal law, and in criminal law you have a higher standard of proof. It's got to be beyond reasonable doubt, whereas in the family court, because it's called a civil court, it's only on the balance of probabilities.
Fast forward a year after the law came into effect, and we have this article from the Sydney Morning Herald on July the 6th, 2013. The headline said it all. False claims are the new court weapon, retiring judge says. Justice David Collier was retiring from the Parramatta Family Court after 14 years on the bench and spoke about mothers, he said, who directed false allegations of abuse against former partners. He said, quote, "When you have heard the evidence, you realise that this is a person who's so determined to win that he or she will say anything. I'm satisfied that a number of people who have appeared before me have known that it is one of the ways of completely shutting husbands out of the child's life. It is a horrible weapon."
I'm not saying for a moment that family violence does not exist. That was never my intention, and it's still not my intention. What I tried to raise with the reporter was that it is used as a weapon. I can't give you a percentage of cases, but I am satisfied that in a way that was not done in the early days of the Act, it is now done.
Protecting mother and child, in their view, but of course it's not protecting them because it's just telling mothers that they can behave appallingly and get away with it, and that's what happens.
But once the allegation is seen to be false, it really is up to the court then to actually get those kids together with their dad as soon as possible. And that's where it falls down, is that, number one, the process takes too long for the court to decide whether it is an allegation or whether there's substance there. And number two, once they realise that there is no substance there and it was an allegation, it takes them a long time to reintroduce the kids.
The family law system in this country, but in many other parts of the world also, is grossly overstretched. It cannot cope with the numbers of people who are separating and who are having disputes about their children. The reality is that the numbers of children living apart from mum and dad by the age of 15 now has almost doubled within a generation. A lot of these parents have never lived together even. So we are reaping the whirlwind from what we have sown in terms of social change in the last few years.
The courts are under-resourced. We don't have enough judges, either family court judges or federal circuit court judges. Lists are long and cases are taking longer themselves.
When my boy's mum first denied access, after I'd had continual access, I didn't take it too well. She had an answering machine. I left some messages that were, I was going off. And admittedly I was. I wouldn't normally do that, but with what I was being accused of from her and the shock of it all and the actual bond I had with my son, I love my son dearly, it hurt. So I vented. And those tapes were there to be transcribed, to be used for the family law court to try and make out I was some lunatic. When really, in reality, I was a father that was just denied access to his son under the most extreme circumstances.
Children love their parents, warts and all. And it takes a concentrated effort to convince a child on the part of one parent that the other parent doesn't love them anymore. And that's the wickedness of it.
Next minute I was a DVO, had a policeman knock on the door, here's a DVO, and I said, what's that? And I rang her up and said, what are you doing this to me for? That was a breach of the DVO. And I had to go to court for that. Yep. And anyway, I got a 12-month good behaviour bond for ringing up wanting to talk to my son, even though I had an access thing in place anyway.
It's odd that we even refer to apprehended violence orders in the family court. To be honest, I was opposed to doing so, because if there was a history of violence, what you want to hear from the witnesses is about that history of violence. You absolutely want to know about that, and if he denies it, then let him tell his story to the judge as well. But the fact that some magistrate 2 years earlier made an order in a 4-minute hearing based upon untested evidence is neither here nor there. So I actually think it's one of those areas where the whole system would be a lot better if we did not require judges to refer to apprehended violence orders, and rather we asked them to look seriously at the history of alleged violence in the case.
I had to initiate the family law court litigation because she wouldn't let me see him, and that was the only avenue I had left. So I did, and I just put an application in for access. Next thing you know, I got a 1-inch thick affidavit back. It cost me $12,000 to reply to. Went to court. They found some reason to have a adjournment, so it cost me $3,000 there. I reckon I probably had about 8 adjournments. So that was $3,000 each time. And I knew that was part of the ploy was to bankrupt me so that I couldn't go back to the family court.
The way it's structured, it's decided on affidavit initially. You have an initial interim hearing, which is only heard on affidavit. The parties don't actually get into the witness box, don't give evidence in that respect. It's only on affidavit. So if you've got a solicitor who can write a good affidavit, you're going to succeed over that next person. But in actual fact, you've got nothing to challenge because it's only an affidavit. You can only challenge it in writing.
Then I had no choice. I had to represent myself. So I was have no legal knowledge at all, writing affidavits. I did 22 subpoenas. Subpoenas come in very handy for finding out the truth. But there's this little trick that they play in the family court, and it's nicknamed trial by ambush. You just give someone a 1-inch thick affidavit, as I've had it when I walked in the court. Oh, by the way, here's this. And I was given an affidavit. We go in and see the judge, and the judge says, oh, look at all this. You need to reply to this. And then I would argue, well, I've only just received it. I'm supposed to have 5 days grace. Yeah, but there's things in here that I'm very concerned about, blah, blah, blah. Adjournment, bang. And that would be another 3-4 months before you could go back. And in the meantime, there would just be another affidavit would be getting processed, ready for you when you go back again.
Under the old Act, you had your fight about something that didn't directly involve the children. I would say you committed adultery. You would say I might have committed adultery, but before that you deserted me. So we do all these fact-finding things, get all, what shall I say, get it all out of our systems, and then the children would tend to fall in place. With the argument over the ground for divorce gone, if people really are desperate to hurt each other, and so many of them are, on both sides, okay, we'll fight about the kids. Wacko.
My boy's mum was caught parroting sexual accusations through my son, getting him to repeat things that she'd said, and they went back out into the interview room and said, who told you to say this? And he said, mummy did. And that was in the social worker report. That was no denying of that. That was written in there. But it didn't matter because they just turned around and said, well, this is a complex matter and we had to go to court, full trial or whatever. But in between then they had a psychiatrist report. Same thing, he rocked up. This is even later. And she did the same thing again, caught parroting sexual complaints to him. And it was ridiculous. He was walking around saying these complaints like a kid wouldn't remember that, but he was rattling it off. And they asked him, is there any more? And he said, I couldn't remember everything.
There's nothing in the Family Law Act that deals with perjury. People can be charged with perjury in the family court, but it requires the Attorney General's fiat to do so. I've sent cases to the Attorney General. Most judges have during some time in their career, and nothing is done.
The judge read out the decision and he gave me custody, which was a real shock. At the same time, my father said it was very sad because it wouldn't have happened if things weren't so dire. So anyway, that was all well and good, and the decision said that Sean, my boy, would live with me, but he'd have 2 counselling sessions beforehand to ease him into it. And the custody would change over from mum to dad. That was something that was new ground for everyone. Even I think, even the judges and the social workers. I don't think they're used to doing this. And every situation's different, obviously. And anyway, but the decision was made, and then the mum appealed the decision. So it took another 12 months. I didn't see him for those 12 months, and they gave phone access or whatever it was, and even tried supervised access and everything they did. She wouldn't do it. She just wouldn't take him, say he was sick and have a doctor's certificate to say he couldn't turn up, and all these silly things were happening in between. Anything just to prolong the distance between when I'd seen him. And I think her case was built on, he hasn't seen him for 6 years. Well, you know, what's the point of seeing him now? But anyway, we got to the appeal, and there was 12 grounds of appeal. Every one of them was thrown out by 3 judges who flew up from Sydney to have that hearing.
There's an awful lot of the problems which the family courts deal with are mental health issues. They may not always be diagnosed. There are people with personality disorders who think they're absolutely fine, thank you very much, and they wouldn't dream of going to a psychiatrist. And so they're not formally diagnosed as such, but we see them in the family law system quite frequently. And again, there's often criticisms of the courts, but it's enormously difficult to deal with people who have mental illnesses which are untreated, undiagnosed even, and for whom the best interest of the children may not be in the forefront of their minds.
The only reason I got custody was because she decided to cut me out completely, and that was obvious to the final, when we got to a final decision in the family court. Do you remember anyone telling you to say anything before you went to those social worker reports and the psychiatrist reports? He knows now. He knows what happened, but you know, what does he do? It was only like a week off his 10th birthday, you know.
I arrived to was it like the
family court, wasn't it?
Yeah, and the visits as well, the year before I moved in.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a few things I had to remember and say.
And who told you to say it?
Mummy. Sorry, Mum, if you're watching.
Oh, well, at least it's over now, but that's what happened.
Oh, when it was my birthday, my dad went to the snow with me, and when he taught me how to ski.
Like kicking the football with Dad. Oh, and I also like going on the biscuit behind a boat really fast.
Because my dad practically makes all the fun. Like, he makes all the funny jokes because everyone else's jokes just sound funny. He just makes it funnier. I'm not sure how, he just does.
Remember Bob Hawke's claim that by the year 2000, no child will live in poverty?
By 1990, no Australian child will be living in poverty.
What that was based on was that he planned to get the fathers. And so instead of the government having to pay for children, his plan was get the fathers to pay.
Child support is determined on the amount that you earn, your gross income, not your net income. The other party's income plays a role, and the amount of time you see your children also plays a role in how they determine child support. But basically, if they can raise your income level, it means you're going to be paying more child support.
Their powers are greater than the powers of the Australian Taxation Office. They can just access your banking account. It doesn't matter whether you've had a separation from a wife or a divorce from a wife and you're in a relationship with another woman and you have a joint bank account with that woman. They can access your bank account and take money out of it.
One example is a constituent whose ex-partner moved from their mining town home to the coast. When he followed so he could continue to spend time with his son, he could no longer find a job that paid as well as one of those mining jobs out west. But the CSA deemed that he was capable of earning the much higher wage so they forced him to make child support payments as if he was actually receiving that income. That situation was just not sustainable for him, so he had no choice but to move back out to the remote west, giving up access to his son so he could pay exorbitant amounts of money to keep his ex-partner in luxury on the coast. Now, the CSA, through its actions, denied this father his right to have meaningful access to his child, and through its actions denied the child its right to a meaningful relationship with its father.
Their salary bonuses are paid on the basis of productivity. Their productivity is gauged by how much money they can recover in child support. That, to me, is a complete and clear conflict of interest.
We've got a case with the Child Support Agency at the moment where the dad has been asking the agency for over 6 years to explain where his debt came from, and the agency's provided some information. I'm not a forensic accountant. I've looked at it and it does my head in. We've had a child support legal aid solicitor have a look at the documents that the Child Support Agency have given us as well, and it does their head in. But yet they tell us that this is it, and this particular dad owes now $30,000, you know, and we all just look at it dumbfounded. Now, to the point that the agency now, when this dad rings up, the agency says, we're not talking to you about it anymore, just pay the money.
They have threatened me with legal action, which I said I'm more than willing to participate in. Tell me when and where, and I will attend court, and maybe the judge can shed some light on what the going-ons or this assumed debt. To date, that was over 1.5 years ago. To date, still no sheriff has issued me summonses to attend court or anything like this. I have not received a phone call from CSA in close to 9 months. And when I do call them, my current case manager, Shirley, is unavailable or not there.
I just don't understand it. And I've been dealing with child support. I've been a customer of the agency for 17 years myself, and I've been looking at other people's child support cases for 10 years. So I'm no novice at it, but I just can't understand this case.
I've got 2 of my accounts with the National Bank in collections, and they've been in collections for over 12 months. I can't afford to pay them because I'm being constantly attacked by child support, either at work to the point where I lose my job, or they just empty my bank account, irrespective of my financial situation. One time that they did do this, they drained my bank account and left $15 in there and put a bar on it so I couldn't even touch that. I was left with no food, no medication and no petrol. I couldn't get to work the next day because of the state I was in and not even having the fuel to be able to drive to my employment.
You know, no one wins out of family breakdown and divorce at the best of times. But when it turns as bad as this, I can tell you there's no winners. Not even the government's winning on this, you know, and the government will end up pushing this guy into a grave.
I live alone and used to look forward to seeing my kids every second weekend, which doesn't happen anymore. And makes you think, well, what am I doing here? Why? Why am I putting myself through all this torment? Just because I love my children and want to be with them, want to see them grow, want to see them thrive. And I can't. And no one can tell me why.
You know, I've got a great team of people around me that, you know, look after these guys, you know, and they're great men, you know, and that's the thing. They're great men. Even this guy with the child support stuff, he's a great bloke, you know, but he's just lost, you know, and I can understand why he's lost. You know, he's lost his kids, he's lost all hope, he has nothing to his name, but he still gets up every morning, you know, and he still opens up and, you know, we deal with it the best we can.
I've been here for up to 3-4 days where I haven't gone outside because I see children playing and it hurts, it breaks, you break down, you can't. I've walked out of supermarkets halfway through doing a shop, just left the trolley and everything because I couldn't cope. Children that look like mine, you hear them playing, laughing. It's hard to take. And this is day in, day out, every day. It doesn't change. And they say, oh, it's like grief, it will go away. It is nothing like grief. Because when you grieve over someone you've lost, they've passed away. They've moved to the next life, if you believe in that, or rendered underground. There's nothing you can do. But being alienated from your children is 100 times worse than grief, because they're still here and they still want to see you. They still want to be part of your life. But because of the manipulation and the enforcement of the government and the laws at present, they can be forced. You can be alienated out of your life at any time, and with no repercussions to her or the effects on the children. And then what's going to happen to these children once they grow up? How are they going to cope? How are they going to structure a family life when this is all they've seen, this is what they grew up with? My son, at the age of 8, confided in me that, Dad, I don't never want to get married. And I said, why, son? He said, because I don't want to have to go through what you're going through. So what do you say to an 8-year-old boy that's sort of resigned from life, from having a normal life, because he's witnessing what's being done to you and you're powerless to do anything about it? So, again, just another government system that say, oh, you'll be right, get on with your life. It's like grief, it'll pass. Time heals everything. But it doesn't. It doesn't change this sadness that's in you, that you live with every day.
It was wonderful at first. Like, it's the most amazing feeling when you know that you created this little being inside you, and then they come out and it's just absolute love. And sharing it with someone is just the dream, because you both love this little creature so much. Everything they do growing up, their first steps, you just idolise them. It's amazing. So when things didn't work out and I ended up being a single mum, it became a lot harder to play both parent roles in the home, and it was hard. Like, there was many dark days for me. I'd never received child support ever for my children. I used to ask for food vouchers because I was struggling to feed the family. There was 4 of us, 3 children and me, and we lived on rice, pasta and potato, and we all got overweight because I had to feed an army on nothing. So after the children grew up and went to high school, my son decided he didn't want to go to high school up in the valley. He wanted to move back to the beach with his dad, and I was happy about that because I thought this would be great for Zach to, spend time with his dad. My daughter went to high school for a short time. She moved back down there too because she was bullied. And I thought, wow, I'm going to have some extra money. I can be the parent that spoils them now. It was the best feeling. Unbeknownst to me, mail had been going out to the property I was minding. Meanwhile, a $2,000 debt from child support had accumulated. I had no idea I had to even pay child support. At one stage, I was paying $386 out of my fortnightly pay, which was just a huge amount of money. I got depressed, really depressed. I had to give up my home that I was renting. I went and shared a house with a friend. I went and shared another house with a friend. So for 5 years, I was living out of shared houses at my age. It was devastating. So I was walking up a street in Newcastle called Watch Street. And when you get to the top of you have to park right up the top at King Edward Park because there's no parking. So when I got to the top of that street, before you turn, all the way up, I was thinking, I just can't go on, I just can't go on. And then I thought, I know people jump off that cliff up there, and I thought, I'll punish him forever. I'll make him realise that the mother of his children was worth more than that. So I got to the top, my heart was racing, and I could feel myself, the emotion, the intense emotion of thinking I'm really going to do it. And I got to the top and I started walking over there because I just wanted to have a look. And then it was like this, I can only explain it as this out-of-body experience. It was black, it was so black. And then I started crying so much, and it was like something snapped in me to the reality of what I was going to do. So I just went, oh my God, and I thought I was going to faint, but I didn't faint. I just started sobbing and sobbing. And I just turned around and I thought, no. I don't know why I said no. It wasn't like I didn't feel brave enough, because I did. I was at my wit's end. So I turned around, and it's a busy road, and at that time of the night there's a lot of cars. I didn't even notice the cars, and I was sobbing, and I was trying to stay near the trees so no one could see me because I was sobbing so much. And then I got to my car and I rang my girlfriend. I couldn't even talk, and she said, come straight over, and I went over there. And she was so wonderful. And then I went to work the next day and I told my boss what had happened, and she sent me straight to counselling. And this lady, she became my absolute friend through years of this. She was so amazing. She made me believe it was going to be all right, and it was in the end. But, you know, that's why I can really, really relate to why people kill themselves, because it becomes all-consuming. It's dark, it's horrible, feeling so powerless. Even though I was still seeing my children, I felt like I had no say in my future. It was just, years is a long time. Even though it was only 5 years, it felt like 20 years.
When you really nut down into the statistics, it's basically the same amount of men to women actually attempt suicide each and every day, but more men have a successful suicide. So that's where the 5 a day come from, and for every 5 men per day, there's 1 female per day.
They talk about youth suicide, young people committing suicide. They talk about older people committing suicide now, but they do not want to acknowledge the fact that you've got a broad spectrum from the 25s through to the 55s who are taking their lives at record rates.
More men die from suicide than actually people in total die on our roads, yet no one knows about it. The government seems to do little about it. We have millions of dollars spent in road safety campaigns, but very little spent on suicide.
Dad?
Yes, mate?
Can you throw my next birthday party?
I'd love to. Hey, given the opportunity, would you come and live with Jenny and me?
Yeah.
Is that a kind of yeah, or a yeah, I'd love to?
Yeah, I'd love to.
He was the first person I ever said that I loved. He was my life. We did everything together. At work, operationally, you could not fault him. He knew that job inside out and back to front. Any comments ever about Brett, and I saw it firsthand, was how much he loved his kids. Brett rang those children every day of his life, of their lives. So when he couldn't talk to them, he just went to pieces.
So when the phone goes at night, are you allowed to pick it up?
No.
Why not?
I don't know, she doesn't let me.
You know, Jenny and I love you to death, and I can't tell you enough how hard we're fighting for you.
There were roughly 1,234 days that we were dealing with the Child Support Agency. And I can tell you, from all of that contact, I can count on one hand how much of that was positive. It was all more money, more pain, more money, more money, more money, justify it. Tell me what you're doing now. Prove this, prove that. There's very little of that contact that's ever positive. We would go to bed every night saying, my God, we made it through today. And the first thing you said when you woke up in the morning was, I wonder what's in store for us today. So there was a time when it just didn't stop. He'd received a call from the child support agency, and he'd said to me that it was about his ex-wife had said that she now had the children for much more time, which meant he should be paying more money. There was no recognition about us still trying to negotiate with his ex-wife about this new private agreement. So this officer spoke to him, and in a nutshell, his payments were about to go from $700 a month for the 2 children to $1,500 a month. So yes, he would have been, what the heck, how am I going to find this money? But he said to me that the officer had said to him that his wife was going for full custody and the payments were going to be $1,500 a month. And in Brett's words, saying to me, he had made a comment to her, and she said, he said to her, I don't know how you people sleep at night. And she said, Mr. Pellini, I sleep like a baby. And with that, she hung up. The coroner did say that he believed the call was the tipping point, because Brett committed suicide on the 9th of December 2011. We weren't sure whether he had tried and maybe wanted to back out, but no, all he had to do was stand up. So when that was very clear, he wanted to go. And I look at that as, some people might disagree, but to me it was like an ultimate decision, because he believed his family would be better off without him, because then there wouldn't be that stress. So he had no idea.
270 men are committing suicide on the basis of the figures that were put to me, and because of the pressure that flows on them through the Child Support Agency. That is 18% of the current death rate of suicide by males in this country. It has to stop.
Had the Child Support Agency said to me in the very beginning, we're sorry. We're sorry. And they were never going to, because that's about liability. But nobody said sorry. If we can stop or save one more father, Brett's death was not in vain.
What do you want me to do, mate?
I don't know.
I don't know either. I love you, mate.
I love you too.
Be bored the rest of my life. Very bored.
I would be sad and really sad. And without my daddy, I wouldn't be alive.
Yep, that's the best.
We need
dads to hold on. We need them to keep up the fight. We need them to be part of this. We don't want to lose any more dads, so hold on, and there will be a light at the end of the tunnel.
Keep the contact there, because your kids are going to want to know you, and I seem to think of it as it's like that safe harbour, We just create that safe harbour for our kids, and when they need it and when they want it, they'll come searching for it. We're there, we're healthy, and we're ready to accept them.
The bigger answer to the problem we've got is to put renewed effort into safe, stable and nurturing families which stay together.
When the Act first came out, you might have had sections and subsections. Now we have subsections. I've got a copy of the Act there. You've seen it. Section 70, EA 341, little b. It's complex. I think it's almost time to recast the Family Law Act.
The system is broken, Madam Deputy Speaker, and the system needs to be fixed. It can be made fairer. We can do something to restore the balance in this area so that fathers can be fathers and that children can have a relationship with their fathers. There will never be winners in family law. There will never be winners in child support. But at least the least that we can do in this place is to make it fair for all parties.
Good morning, summer. Good morning, sky. Good morning, tree. Good morning, cry. Good morning, morning.